the State of Israel. This State of Israel has launched many wars against its neighbors, and some would argue and would say, oh no, the Arab armies came and they have started to fight Israel. They have fought in 1956 against the Egyptians with the alliance of the Britons and the French. Then they have they've committed the massacre in Khan Yunis in Gaza City. They've killed more than 250 people. And then in 1967, they have launched the war against Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, Gaza Strip, and the West Bank. Later on, they have committed many massacres in the 70s across Europe against some Palestinians, assassinations. Later on, they have committed many massacres in Lebanon. They have committed many massacres in Sabra and Shatila. And later on, they have hardly killed the Palestinians when the first Intifada happened. And later on, the second Intifada in 2000 happened. And then we started to see how cruel the Israelis were when they were killing us, the Palestinians. They were hardly killing us, using all the weapons, disproportionate power. They were using all kind of weapons against us. Okay? And you've seen what happened in Gaza war, how many people were killed. More than 1,500 mostly children, women. And according to the UN, no schools were used by Hamas to fire rockets, not according to me. You have all these facts, and it's you who judge, and it's you who will determine who's right and who's wrong. Thanks.
Quick speech called upon Mr. Moe.
I hope I didn't rant and rave tonight. Unless by the other side, I tried not to. But let me just, without ranting or raving, answer some of the points that came up. The Louis Theroux program was answered. I don't know, I just don't think that's a useful guide to things. The last Louis Theroux program I saw was about Paul Daniels. He came out in a pretty bad light, but I don't think that means that all magicians or all Brits are represented by Paul Daniels in it. I mean, come on, let's at least talk about the reality and the history that's going on. You just heard from the previous speaker, a classic example, by the way, of what I'm going to attribute good motives to him. I'm going to be benevolent and assume that he's speaking without any ill intent. But what you've just heard then, in that case, is a classic example of bad history from somebody who's had to live in a totalitarian society. I was in Egypt a few months back, and I saw a great example of this. When there's the 8th of October city, and there's an 8th of October road, and I said to an Egyptian friend, "What's all this 8th of October business going on?" He said, "He's a very, very educated guy. Oh, that's because of our victory over the Israelis." I went, "Your what?" "Yeah, it's our victory over the Israelis." "When was that?" I said, No, the Israelis beat Egypt." "Really? I didn't know that." The fact is that if you live in a society which controls what you think, you can come out with real crap. Quickly, Sri Lanka hasn't come up tonight, but I would love to know if they're doing society here, or anyone else is doing something about we're too critical or not critical enough of Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, when it put down its terrorist problem with Tamil Tigers more than a year ago, massacred tens of thousands of people. The press were kept out. The press didn't moan about it. They just stayed away. Well, that's how some states operate. It's not how Israel operates. But you do, again, have to ask yourself, why this constant focus on what Israel does in this? The fact is that Israel, the land that Israel is on, is a too much promised land. It's been promised by too many, I believe, fake deities, too many teachers through fake religious books. And the fact is, if you read the history of that land, it's a terrible, terrible thing. Too many people think that God tells them to settle there. And so there's a God problem, a God congestion problem in the area. Look, I think the best way this is sorted out is to take God out of it, take out divine claims, because they're all counter to each other. We've heard a lot about history, or a bit of it anyway. And we can always discuss history. But let's just look for a second about the future. The future, as I see it, will be, as I said repeatedly, the Palestinian state will be created, and I hope it is, and I hope that it has international support. But it can, I repeat, only be created if it recognizes that an Israeli state with a Jewish identity also exists alongside it. That remains now, as it has been for years, the biggest stumbling block. And one quick thing, finally. the reference that has been made repeatedly to the international law. I mean, now I don't know. I just don't like this view of history and the view of the future. That instead of armies and so on, we'll just parade international lawyers to sort out all problems. I mean, it works up to a point, but there are also things that are extra-legal problems that lawyers can't deal with. There are problems when the international security is threatened, when lawyers aren't the answer, and the international community, very quickly, and the UN is a reason for Israel to feel very concerned. Because since 1975, its policy has been anti the existence of the state. That is a problem, and that is one of the things that's going to stop.
Thank you so much, Mr. I'd like to call upon Mr. Mark MacDonald, please. Thank you.
You know, as an international lawyer, I think that I can solve all the world's problems. Of course I can, and look at international law. I would slightly disagree with my comrade on the left here and say that I think there are many people within Israel who do want peace. And I think we have to separate the Israeli government from the people of Israel. I've talked about the unusual and quite problematic voting system within Israel, but it produces a government that's very polarised. When we talk about being polarised, just as a side issue here, I've debated this issue a few times, predominantly mainly against the Israeli embassy, and they've always been very cheerful, albeit a very obviously depressing, sometimes quite emotive subject, but we've always been able to come away shaking hands. The reason why is because we haven't tried to be too polarised with the issue. That's what I've tried to do, in a way, is try not to be so polarised on the issue, because being polarised solves nothing. Being in one camp or the other doesn't. And so what the Israeli embassy, when I've debated them, has recognised on a number of occasions, is that Israel has got it wrong. Has got it wrong on a number of occasions. What I've heard on my left-hand side is an almost denial of anything bad about Israel. And that's a shame, because when you polarise yourself like that, and there's a tendency then for the other one to react, is what you get is two very emotive discussions, really not much constructive discussion. So I've only got a couple of minutes to try and have a constructive discussion on the issue of the Middle East process, which has lasted 60 years. Bear with me. Two-state solution, the days of the two-state solution is running out. We're in the last dying seconds of it. The only way that we can force a one-state solution may never happen, because I can't imagine either side agreeing to it happening. The only solution is a two-state solution. But we have to do something about it, and we have to do something now. And the way to do it is to try and be constructive, and try and be fair, and raise arguments where arguments need to be raised, and be critical when it needs to be critical. Don't try and be totally 100% pro-Israeli. Don't try and be 100% pro-Palestine. It achieves nothing. There are serious problems going on in Gaza. We've got to raise that issue. We've also got to talk about Hamas. Now, it's hard for Hamas to turn around on the one hand and see that its brothers and its sisters are being killed by Israeli jets, but on the other hand be told that you've got to recognise us. I can see that, but they've got to recognise the state of Israel. But it should not be a precursor. It should not be a precursor to discussions. We have to talk today.
Mr. MacDonald, you've gone over your time. That's speaking. Thank you very much. I'll call upon Mr. Sam Westbrook.
heard a lot from both sides. I would like to reiterate that I believe the opposition has presented emotion and conjecture. We have given you facts and rational observations. I stand by that. The extraordinary idea that the Israeli government is somehow separate from the Israeli people, I'd very quickly like to refute. The Israeli government is the Israeli people. It's a democratic country. That's how it works. For order that there be peace, in order to resolve the situation, that must exist on the other side. Hamas is not the representative of the Palestinian people. They are not democratically elected. They are not a democratic government. They cannot be a partner to peace. We must look at the hypocrisies, the double standards, the demonisation, the dehumanisation, the delegitimization of Israel when it comes to this question, are we too critical? We are not criticising, we are dehumanising, we are delegitimizing. Whether it is pro-peace activists being pissing through the cheek, or whether it is a desire to negotiate with Hamas, a country which wants to annihilate the Jews, I don't think this is rational observation. In order to properly speak, we have to be for peace. And I don't believe what we're hearing out of the other side, and what we're hearing out of the entire anti-Israeli movement, is anything pro-peace. It is purely anti-Israeli, as I've said at the beginning. Israel Apartheid Week. Mr. Murray mentioned Khaled Abu Tomei earlier, a Palestinian journalist who was unable to write in the West Bank because it's a totalitarian regime. It always has been for the last 40 years. He now writes for the Jerusalem Post because even as a Palestinian, he is able to put his point across. When he has come to both America and the UK and seen this Israel Apartheid Week that he's so obsessed about over here and has enjoyed so much, he has said, as a Palestinian, this sickens me. Why are you not teaching my people democracy? Why are you not helping to liberty? And why are you not ending the corruption which leads to bad government, which leads to totalitarian government, which gives no chance for peace? And so I would ask you to go away with this thought. By all means, read as much literature as you want. I'd like you to give an objective approach and read as much of each side as you can. And I do believe that the rationality of a pro-Israeli and yet a pro-peace sentiment will bring you in our favour. But just go away with this. If there is the slightest chance that by joining in with this demonisation of Israel, whether it's through the media, through your Israel Apartheid Weeks, or through whatever medium, if there is the slightst chance that you are helping prolong the violent hatred, the rhetoric that determines people will be killed for the foreseeable future, if you are helping to prolong that, you are part of the problem and not part of the solution. Just think about that. Thank you.
Okay, we're now opening the discussion to the floor. So, gentlemen over there, if you have any comments or questions?
Can I have your name? Sorry, I forgot your name. The gentleman in red and pink.
Mr. Murray.
Mr. Murray. Excellent. I must say, I quite admire your ability to recall facts about the lives of the people in Gaza. I've got a newspaper in front of me, and it's dated 16th January 2011. It's a publication from the UN. It states that 50% of all the people in Gaza are actually unemployed. 4 out of 5 people rely on the food aids. 75% of people lack the basic necessity of food. And 95% of all the businesses that were opened by the people in Gaza are actually closed by the Israeli government. Now, this is a UN fact. Now, I'm talking about facts. There was actually a bit. Okay. The question is that I wonder where you actually get your facts, because what you say and what I read here does not make sense.
Where you get your facts?
Very good. I get them right. I think I urge you to get them, which is from a number of sources. First of all, read as much history as you can. Don't read biased one-sided accounts of history from any side. From any
No, where did you get them from?
The Sun. First of all, I get them from reading a lot of history. Secondly, from reading a lot of current affairs. And thirdly, by travelling a lot and by speaking with a lot of people as a journalist. Now look, the thing you've just read from, is that the Palestine?
It doesn't matter where it's from. The figures is from the UN.
It's an interesting source. Is it the Palestine?
The figures are from the UN.